back to the ground. Sure did. And went to work. Gosh, that was a long time ago. There wasn't no jobs around. Went to work for a gas company in Central City. Worked there for a while. And worked out here at the Job Corps for 20 years. That was my last job that the last job that I had was out at the Job Corps. It's a good job. There's about 400 children out there, young men and women that you had to take care of, teach them things. And it was interesting, quite interesting. You had your good kids and you had your bad kids. I took care of the warehouse, which was all the clothing that was out there, plus all the machinery and all the vehicles. I took care of all of them. And I was pretty busy doing all that stuff. But it was interesting. We were a satellite branch of Morganfield Job Corps Center. They had a couple thousand down there, and we had about 400. But they told us what to do. They come up here every little bit, says we're doing things right and all that, Plus we're doing it over the phone. We was that way for quite a few years, and then they branched off. They had a contractor that didn't want one or the other of the places, and so they decided at the time to split it off and instead of a satellite branch, we were on our own at that time. But that was okay. We didn't have to take any. We had to go to Morganfield every day, and we had a driver that did that. And I went down there quite a lot, doing different things. And that didn't bother me because I didn't have to go down there all the time. The regular driver, he got tired of it, but he was there almost all the time that I was there. He spent 20 years out there. I spent 19 years and 10 months, I think, something like that, out there. But one day I really didn't like the way they did business. Wasn't anything you could do about it except leave. But you took their responsibility from the people out there. And my part of my job, well, the entire part of my job was through the Department of Labor. And so I had a boss that was over them. But those folks out there said, no, we're your boss. And I said, what about the Department of Labor? What if they tell me to do something? And they said, you don't do it. You do it through us. So all the years I was out there, I had that argument. I had a lady boss that worked. She said, I've got a beautiful place where I work. She said, have you ever heard of the Liberty Bell? I said, yeah. She said, okay, I'm a half a block from the Liberty Bell. I can look at it out my work window. That'd be great for her to see that, probably second hand to her, and pay no attention to it. But I thought it would be a great place to work, that kind of a deal. But she was a nice lady, but she was pretty stern about the Department of Labor rules and regulations. And she would tell me things that I had to do, which that came, the heading was vehicles and things like that, machinery and so on. That's what they controlled. And I was told to do things to vehicles and whatever. And those people out there said, no, you don't do it that way. You come to us and ask us. It just, having two bosses that clashed all the time. I clashed with both of them because I get ill about which one am I going to mind today, that kind of a deal. She would call me 2 or 3 times a week and tell me to do this and that with the vehicles and whatever. And the boss out there would always say, you're scheduled to do this other thing this week. So I'd have to call the Department of Labor back and say, I can't do that because I got to do this other thing. And then they'll look at me and say, with the Department of Labor, you will do it. So I had that argument for almost 20 years. And I had a bad attitude most of the time. My wife told me, quit that place. Tell them where to end up and quit it. I said, no, I don't want to. What I was doing, just being, I had a friendly face and I was helping those kids out, talking to them when they come in where I worked. And they'd leave there laughing, carrying on. I said, I think I'm helping them out, just changing their attitude a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing that.
That's important.
Met a lot of strange people, a lot of people. The place started off with the students. It was jail or Job Corps. They all went before the judge, and the kids didn't know what Job Corps was, so they picked that instead of jail. So that was the type of kids we had. Some of them was pretty mean people. And then it changed to any kid that poor people that say Social Security recipients and welfare people and all that kind. Those were the kids that were eligible for the Job Corps after about the last 5 or 6 years was that way. But we got a better caliber of children in that last part. But really, most of them, 90% of them, you wouldn't want to take home with you. You don't know what they got on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm away from home, so I'll do what I want to do. And a lot of them did what they wanted to do in his home.
What did they do there? What was their function?
They had auto mechanics. The women could take any skill that the boys took, but they had nursing. That was what they applied for to start with. But if they didn't want nursing, they could go over to something else. They had plenty of them that was over in the brick land. What do you call it? Anything to do with concrete, land blocks, helping build houses, frames, all that kind of stuff. They taught them how to do that, and mechanics, and carpenter work, stuff like that. It was interesting for them. You had your pick of whatever you wanted, whatever they wanted to do. And they go in and do it. If they didn't want to do it, they switch over to something else. But they had a diesel mechanic, they had auto mechanics, and stuff like that. My building was attached to a part of another building. The ones that take care of the grounds The ones that didn't, they had low IQs. They would register for the groundskeeper, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they called it, but it's what it was. And had a teacher for that, and he'd take them out every day, and they'd mow the grass and clean up this place and that place, and if painting had to be done, they would do all of that, and the teachers would teach them how to do it, and they would help with the bricklaying class sometimes, and they would build buildings out there and different things, and they stayed busy all the time, pretty busy. If I'd went out there as a student, I think I would have been in the diesel uh, class. That was interesting what they had. They go around all over the nation, and when the armies have sales and we bid on something,
Mm-hmm.
I've been to a whole bunch of places. I see something, I'd bid on it, and if it was machinery, I would ask them, the people out there that might need it, when we got back, if they wanted it. If they didn't, then I could cancel it out. If they wanted it, then we had to wait about 2 or 3 weeks before the paperwork was laid out, and then we go get it. And that was pretty interesting doing that. They had big, huge pieces of machinery out there, and the mechanic shop would fix them to where they would run real good and all that, and drive them. They had places back up the hill behind it where they could do excavating, level off ground and all that.
Yeah.
And that was the workshop. So that was quite interesting. A lot of pieces of machinery, I looked at them, I said, what is that thing? But I had a lot of fun traveling. I went to Fort Knox and went a lot of times to Fort Campbell. And I went to a place in Phoenix and one in Tucson, Arizona. And one up in Indiana. I can't think of the name of it. Go to Louisville and cross the river, and there's a town right in there.
New Albany's right across there. There's New Albany.
They had a big surplus, big depot up there. And can't talk. But they had a lot of stuff you could pick up, bring home with you. A lot of stuff you had to put it on a trailer and bring it home. But it was quite interesting just getting away from out there and going and doing something. I enjoyed Fort Knox. I knew the people up there that took care of all the junk. Plus, there was a place in you go to Lexington and come back south to a big place there. I can't think of the name of the place.
South of Lexington would be like Richmond, Corbin, London, Kentucky.
Right down in that area. It was a big place, and it was they considered it a high security because they had a lot of stuff in there that didn't want people to see, and whatever junk, more or less. I called it junk. They didn't call it that. But I went up there for the clothing. I found pants and shirts and shoes and whatever, boots for the students out there. And I had to ask for it. And about a month later, they'd say, okay, come get it, or they send you a note saying, sorry about that. But that was interesting because I didn't take a day off and go over there. Well, I did all of that at Fort Knox and Fort Campbell too. I asked for clothing and machinery and stuff. Can't think it was some depot. Bluegrass Army Depot was the name of it. Bluegrass Army Depot. Down in that country somewhere. I think I lost and I found it. But it's a nice country down in there, though. There's a lot of beautiful country up and around Lexington, the Everest. Up in there. Expensive country.
So did these kids live there?
Huh?
You said did the kids at the Job Corps, did they live there? Were they there full time, or they just came during the day?
They had a certain time that they had to be there. Like auto mechanics, they'd spend 6 months there. Some of them 8 and 10 months. And some of them would make it, some of them wouldn't. They had a big fancy graduation after about once a month. They'd have graduation in the gym. Dudes were walking down the aisle and all that stuff. And they liked it. They thought it was really something. And it was really. They got their GED out there. They had a big, up on the hill, a big school that taught them regular school work. And you get your GED from there. Which a lot of kids, they come there for the GED. And they'd take up a school. Some of them would, you can stay there 2 or 3 terms if you want to. If you get your GED in so many months, you can just quit that and go over to auto mechanics or something like that. Learn a skill and your GED, which was pretty important for them. And give them something to think about, you know. Instead of going asking for a job saying, I don't have an education, I quit school, and all that stuff. So employers don't like to hear that kind of nonsense.
That's correct. So when did you retire from the Job Corps?
When I was 70 years old. That was
16 years ago.
Yeah.
So 2009.
16 years. And they closed part of it down out there. And some Morganfield would come out there and work. Had a contractor that wasn't paying the bills out there. So I was still arguing with the Department of Labor. And the bosses, 2 or 3 of them called me in one day and said, why don't you do this? I said, why don't you call the Department of Labor? I'm tired of it. I'm tired of arguing with you. I'm tired of arguing with them. Because if you want something, call the Department of Labor. Y'all hash it out, then come back to me and I'll do it. Which to me was logical. And they said, no. And I went back to my office, and the boss's secretary called me up and said, come over here. I said, okay. And they had the paperwork laying on the desk. Said, you're terminated. A good way to lose a job, isn't it? I don't know if I'd have stayed there much longer or not. I was going crazy trying to argue with those people out there. The other people didn't have to worry about it that worked out there because they didn't deal with the Department of Labor. I was the only one that had to. And they didn't like it. They didn't like to think that I could take orders from somebody off center. Never did like it. And I kept telling them that, you know, we got to come to some kind of a happy conclusion here. And they came to it. They run me off.